You had a Dell computer in 2005, didn't you? I know I did, and that's how I first discovered the action RPG Fate, whose first few levels were included as a pre-downloaded demo on most Dell units at the time. I played those demo levels repeatedly as a kid, and it isn't now until over 15 years later that I've found the time to purchase and play through the full game in an attempt to see if it lives up to my childhood nostalgia. Disclaimer: if you're in the market for Fate, it's worth noting that one of its sequels, Fate: The Traitor's Soul, contains the majority of this game's dungeon and loot content on top of Traitor Soul's unique new content. The internet tells me that it's more or less objectively the better purchase, but I have more interest in examining the base game in isolation to get a better chance of seeing what it does and how it evolves from game to game than I do in experiencing the ultimate Fate game. With that being said, what is Fate? Fate was developed in 2005 by Wild Tangent, a studio who not only created games but managed a game distribution platform of the same name. This Wild Tangent platform is still around today, and its target audience hasn't changed much over the years. Heaps of hidden object games, a slew of solitaire spin-offs, and a multitude of Match 3 games were, and still are, the dominant genres of the app, which makes the Fate series somewhat of an anomaly. This loot-gathering, dungeon-crawling RPG is a bit more hardcore than most games you'll find on either side of it while scrolling through the Wild Tangent store, and that's probably why it's one of their few offerings that made its way to Steam eventually. And though you may not need to worry about the Wild Tangent app when trying to play this game today, its original home is still worth mentioning as it speaks to a lot of Fate's design. The games it shared virtual shelf space with are ones designed for a much more casual audience than your average Steam game, and in that respect, Fate is no different. Fate is simple, very simple, and whether or not that's a positive or a negative probably depends on how much you're looking to get out of this game. After designing the appearance of your character, you're dropped into the world. This world is just a simple town and the infinitely large dungeon that sits directly beneath it. Your goal is simple: kill the semi-randomly generated main enemy who has been placed on a semi-randomly generated floor in the dungeon, which necessitates doing a bunch of semi-randomly generated quests to power up and acquire your semi-randomly generated loot. You know how it goes, and you've played this game before even if you haven't played this game before. It's the same sort of fight, loot, sell, repeat gameplay loop found at the center of plenty of action RPGs, and what makes Fate unique is in how little it attempts to hide it. The very first quest I received was a man who let me know that his priceless family heirloom called
Akbak's Superior Soft Gloves of the Warrior
were lost in
Level 3.
Swap out the randomly selected item and floor, and that's basically the blueprint for every single quest the game offers from every NPC. They're an excuse to delve deeper into the dungeon, and no time is wasted on anything else. In fact, that's a pretty good description of every mechanic in this game. With next to no time spent on story, characters, crafting, or anything else, Fate is entirely predicated on its core loot gathering, dungeon delving, and combat gameplay loop. So that begs the question, is that loop any fun? I thought so, at least enough to make me lose an entire weekend to this dungeon's depths. The fundamentals of this gameplay loop are pretty simple. There's a quest log that stores a maximum of 3 quests, and those quests are always some variation of killing a monster on a particular floor. Fill up your quest log, clear out enough of the relevant floors to satisfy those quest conditions, gather all the rare loot, teleport back up to town, equip what you need, and sell what you don't. Repeat that process until you've done about 50 of the game's floors, and you'll get yourself to the end credits. When you're not in the dungeon, you're interacting with the NPCs in town who will supply you with a simple quest or offer a service of some sort. The blacksmith to purchase arms and armor, the wizard who sells magical spells, etc. When you are in the dungeon, it's mainly just simple exploration as you uncover more and more of each floor, and killing all the enemies who get in your way. No puzzles or anything like that. The enemies increase in difficulty and variety as you descend further into the dungeon, and eventually you'll find foes with unique patterns like summoning smaller minions or casting spells at you. The combat is standard for games of this type. You move around your cursor and can attack by clicking on opponents. There's a lock-on system in place so that once you've clicked on a foe, you can hold down to ensure that all subsequent attacks continue to hit them, which is helpful when you're fighting large groups. Fate uses a classless system, so the types of attacks you're going to be dishing out are based entirely on what stat and skill points you've allocated into. The stats are your standard fare of strength, dexterity, health, magic, etc. You'll probably fall into some approximation of a mage, warrior, or rogue. The skill points don't really offer much in terms of customization, as 90% of them are just weapon skills, so in my case I funneled almost all of my skill points into whatever weapon that I used. There's little reason to not do exactly that, unless you're playing a more magic-based character. Regardless of how your character is statted, you're also given an animal companion from the start of the game, a dog or a cat. They don't need to be micromanaged, but instead will automatically follow you around and attack nearby enemies. They can also be temporarily transformed into powerful beasts by feeding them different kinds of fish, acquired through a rudimentary fishing minigame when you find water within the dungeon. Perhaps more interestingly is that these pets also serve non-combat functions. They have their own second inventory independent of yours that can be used as a temporary storage, and at the click of a button they can run back to the surface to sell that inventory to the merchants in town. This is a cool feature that helps maximize time spent dungeon crawling, though with how easy teleporting back and forth between the dungeon and its town is, with scrolls sold by the vendors, it's not a function I used all that often. Another one of Fate's unique mechanics comes into play when your health bar hits 0. The game's namesake is a choice made upon death, and your fate is one of 3 selections. Instantly spawn where you died while incurring an experience penalty, spawn on a random floor nearby and lose a percentage of your gold, or drop all of your gold on the ground with a chance to reclaim it all if you can return to the spot of your death in time. It's a classic choice of risk versus reward. They're all decently competitive depending on how much gold you had at the time of death and how confident you are in your death being a fluke. I switch between them relatively often, especially in the late game when I was less and less confident in my ability to get back to the spot of my death unscathed. Fate also gives you a few different ways to keep experiencing its loop after the credits roll. With the big bad defeated, you can go back to the town and talk to the original quest giver, who will present you with one of 2 options. 1. You can keep playing the game on your same character and delve down deeper into the infinite dungeon. Or 2. You can create a descendant, which is basically just starting a brand new character, but with the small twist of being able to pass down an item to them with bonus stats. This second option is especially enticing because those bonus stats can stack, so as more and more generations pass, you will have descendants wielding an increasingly powerful family heirloom. It's a great way to incentivize repeat playthroughs. But as cool as some of the new things Fate introduces to the action RPG formula are, I think it's more defined by how little it introduces. Fate is its gameplay loop, and there's nothing to mask it or get in its way. If you've played 5 minutes of Fate, you've seen all that Fate has to offer, and that's arguably its greatest strength and its greatest weakness. Explore each layer of the dungeon, kill the enemies, do the quest, sell the items, repeat indefinitely. It kept me satisfied until just about the last 10% of the game, which is right around the time I had to start spamming health potions to keep up with enemy damage, and right around the time the density of environmental objects that are too easy to click on really started hurting my runs. If you look for flaws in Fate, you're gonna find them, but I'd be lying if I said it didn't have me under its spell for a good few days. And it all comes back to that simplicity. I could just as easily jump in and spend 10 minutes grinding out some new equipment and extra levels as I could 10 hours, and each would still feel like a meaningful increase in my character's power. In an attempt to make an action RPG for a casual audience, Wild Tangent took the tenets of the genre and boiled them down to their absolute core essentials. Then they shipped those essentials as a playable video game. The lack of depth is part of why I don't see myself playing the game in the truly infinite fashion that it technically does support, but it's also what made it so frictionless and easy to get a weekend or 2 out of it. Fate isn't just a simple action RPG, it's a pure action RPG. I still had fun playing it even today, and for me, it was fun not despite its simplicity, but because of it.